Okay, so let's get started. Thank you so much for joining us today for our session, Native Women Leading the Way from Revolution to the Future. My name is Philippa Rappaport. I'm the Head of Education and Engagement at the Smithsonian Office of Educational Technology, and I'm so pleased to be joined today by Renée Gokey, who's the Teacher Services Manager, and Yadira Hadlett, is an education specialist, both from the National Museum of the American Indian and also behind the scenes Rhett Ransom from the Office of Educational Technology providing IT support. Um, so, in our session today, we'll consider how, in many Native cultures, women hold leadership roles in society. And Renée and Yadira will discuss a new teaching poster that focuses on three Native American women whose actions were historically significant during the American Revolution. Um, a Mohawk leader of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, a Cherokee Beloved Woman, and a Shawnee Peace Chief. And they'll tie history to contemporary Native culture. So this poster topic is part of a larger exploration of the American Revolution, which is in the museum signature learning resource, Native Knowledge 360, and they'll tell you more about that today. So I'm so pleased they could be here today, and all of you. So you're already introducing yourselves in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you need captions, please just click on the Show Captions button. Also, we'd love for this session to be as interactive as possible, so please do feel free to put your comments in the chat as you have them and questions. It would be great if you could tag your comments to everyone. Otherwise, it just comes to hosts and panelists, which is nice for us, but everyone else won't see your comments. So you just have to tag the little blue button to everyone. Okay? And we'll also read those out as they come in. We try to respond in real time to everything, but if we miss something, we'll certainly get to it by the end. And you can also use the Q&A button feature. So today's session is the seventh in a 10-part series that is meant to explore teaching techniques and strategies and resources that help tell the story of America's 250th. So this series celebrates well-known people and events and accomplishments of our nation, and it also is intended to provide opportunity to discuss lesser-told histories. Our goal is that you leave each session with a collection of techniques and ideas that help students think critically, recognize their own value, appreciate others' perspectives, and gain confidence to be engaged learners. So what you're looking at here is our program page, and that's where you can find all of the 10 sessions, either information to register or later the archived version of the session. We also create a Learning Lab collection for each of our sessions. So this is an image of the Learning Lab collection, and I'll put that link in the chat in just a minute. So a reminder that this session is being recorded, and to get us started, we like to start out with a question. And today's question that we'd love to hear your thoughts on is, when you hear American Revolution, what comes to mind? And so while you're putting your comments in the chat, I will turn it over to Yadira and Renée.
Thank you so much, Philippa. Yeah, we're going to take a moment and just, we invite you to add your thoughts into the chat. So, protests, yes. Very good. Just taken. Oh. Family divisions, yes. We'll talk a little bit about that. A little bit later. War, protest, industry, changing of times. Wonderful. I think I'll just wait one more moment to see if anyone else. Yes, time of conflict and decision making for citizens versus subjects. Yes, okay. Well, thank you so much for adding your comments in the chat, and please feel free to continue to add. I just want to take a moment to introduce myself. So thank you again for joining us. My name is Yadira Hadlett. I'm an education specialist at the National Museum of the American Indian, and I'm based in New York.
Hello, everybody. Hato. My name is Renée Gokey. I'm the Teacher Services Manager at the National Museum of the American Indian in DC. I'm a citizen of the Eastern Shawnee Tribe of Oklahoma, and we're one of 3 federally recognized tribes that now call Oklahoma our home today. So all 3 of us are there. And our families have been, we were part of many tribes that were forcibly removed west of the Mississippi from our original homelands in the Ohio River Valley. And again, we've been in Oklahoma now for over 200 years. So you had some great thoughts in the chat about when you hear about the American Revolution, what comes to mind. A lot of students might say things like George Washington or patriots or loyalists. And today what we'll do is we'll explore why it's important to deepen our understanding of this period 250 years ago when the United States was just being established. While studying the American Revolution, we often learn only about the roles of the American colonists and the British. However, the war impacted Native people as well. The 13 colonies occupied and bordered the homelands of dozens of Native nations. And these nations had deep connections and complicated relationships with both the American colonists and the British. So the outcome of this war affected them too. And now Yadira is going to tell you a little bit more about our National Education Initiative, where this work that we're going to talk about today comes from.
Thanks, Renee. Native Knowledge 360, or NK360, is our museum's education initiative, which seeks to transform teaching and learning about Native Americans. We provide free online resources and PD for K through 12 teachers and students. This long-term initiative provides educators and students with deeper and more comprehensive knowledge and perspectives about Native peoples. NK360 classroom-ready resources and professional development can empower teachers just like you to confidently build meaningful classroom experiences that provide a fuller understanding of Native Americans' histories, cultures, and contemporary lives. Okay, so we're going to jump right into the learning now that you've heard a little background about our work. I'm going to go to a map and just do some general observations. Yeah, I can advance it. Great. Okay, so to help contextualize this history, let's take a look at this map to understand the physical landscape during this period. So on the right, you're going to see this pink shaded section, which represents British colonies. And below, you'll see Spanish colonies represented in the orange. Now, if you look closer, you can see a red dotted line, and that marks the proclamation line of 1763. And that was established by King George III to prevent colonial expansion into Native homelands. So as you can tell from this, that line cuts directly through Native homelands, and both the war and the colonist movements deepened the divide between Native nations.
Thank you, Yadira, for sharing these observations. And this map, as Yadira said, is part of the teaching poster that we'll focus on today. The map's titled Native Nations and Colonial Settlements from circa 1763. And in the map, as Yadira pointed out, we see that there are many more people and nations involved than what is typically taught in our classrooms. By the 1770s, Europeans had been colonizing North America for 2 centuries. As independent and sovereign nations living within and surrounded by the 13 colonies that we see in the pink, Native nations understood the need to maintain relationships with the nearby colonists through trade and diplomacy. the colonists also understood the need to work with Native nations who knew the land, who'd lived there for many times, and had their own diplomatic traditions. As a result, when the revolution started, some Native people sided with the Americans and others with the British. Many remained neutral, believing that this was not their fight. But as the revolution spread, many of those who wanted to stay neutral were eventually forced to choose a side. So now we'll move on to our teaching poster.
Yeah, we're very excited to share this resource. So here you're looking at the cover of our newest NK360 teaching poster. It's called Native Women Leading the Way from Revolution to the Future. In many Native cultures, it's common for women to hold leadership roles. For example, female leaders are important decision makers and have always held crucial roles in continuing traditional knowledge and cultural practices. 3 examples of important female leaders during the American Revolution are Konwatsi'tsiaienni, a Mohawk leader of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, Nanye'hi, a Cherokee Beloved Woman, and Nonhelema, a Shawnee Peace Chief. In this image, you see contemporary women from those same communities, Mohawk, Cherokee, and Shawnee. Okay, so we'll advance to the next slide. And want you to, actually, before we start talking about this particular image, we want you to think, why do you think there is less information available about Native women leaders during the American Revolution? We'll give you a moment to think about that. And thank you, Philippa, for adding that into the chat. Okay, thank you, Curtis. So history often focuses and cares about maybe male voice. Yep. Colonialism was very patriarchal. Okay, I'm also seeing it because the ones who wrote were usually men, and their voices were not considered in their narratives. Yeah. Is anything standing out to you, Renee?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are definitely different values at play. And maybe women don't always have the public roles in the same way. And sometimes even in Native cultures, sometimes they have maybe powerful roles, but they might look a little different. Also, there's, from this time period, there's no photography and there's just not a lot of imagery of women from the time period. And so I think that plays in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. These are all good points. Again, just reiterating the focus on patriot and loyalist men is what we generally learn about. Women are not on the front lines, or at least it's not covered that women are on the front lines as much as men, or maybe their roles are unknown. So yeah, European and American traditions of recording history differ significantly from the ways history is preserved and passed down in Native cultures. For example, oral tradition is highly valued, and mnemonic devices such as wampum belts are used to record history and agreements. So why don't we go ahead and advance to the next slide? There we go. So it should be noted that European and American historians of the 1700s didn't always record and preserve records related to women. Take a moment to consider why those historians failed to record information on the 3 women, including images, as carefully as they did for perhaps their male counterparts. And in addition, there are sometimes conflicting histories of these women's lives, yet we use the information we have to learn about these influential leaders. The writer of this particular poster used primary and secondary sources and worked tirelessly for over 4 years with Native communities to create this content. I'll pass that over to you, Renee.
Thank you, Yadira, and I'm seeing some great responses in the chat about sort of different value systems and ideas around leadership. And Yadira was just mentioning the different ways that communities might record their history. And she mentioned mnemonic devices. So we're actually going to do a little See, Think, Wonder, which is a thinking routine that we think is really a nice way to connect with your students in the classroom, and actually adults like them too. So we invite you to sort of use the chat if you'd like. And you might be curious to know what a wampum belt is. So let's start with just simply, what do we see here when we look at the slide of this Hiawatha wampum belt?
Yes, and please, we encourage you to just use the chat, just some general observations of what you see. Okay. Oh, thank you. Woven beads, yes. A contract. Ooh, yes, Sheena, we're going to get into that in just a moment. Mathematical patterns. Oh, that's fascinating. Yes, thank you for sharing that. Symbolism.
Information passed with pictures.
Blue and white. Yep. Unity of 5 pieces. Oh, this is beautiful. A map. Okay. Great. Okay, well, I'm gonna jump in. These are wonderful responses. We're gonna actually touch upon some of those in just a moment. But yes, wampum belts are made from foghog and whelk shells by many Eastern tribal nations, and they were used between nations to make agreements and treaties. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the use in just a moment. But let's go into the think. Now, what are you thinking as you observe this image? Sounds like there are some wonderful inquiries already there, but let's see if we can pull those back up here. Yeah, the colors are beautiful.
And somebody might know quite a bit about these. Sheena's saying this is a contract. So I wonder if there's background knowledge that some of us or our students might bring, from their own background knowledge. But when we see this also, what else do we think based on maybe the patterns? Oh, somebody's saying thinking of the word belt and its different meanings.
Yeah, what's standing out to me, Barb said something about the squares that are standing out in the tree. Very good. Yeah. So I'll go ahead and add a little bit more background here. The Hiawatha belt symbolizes the unity of the original 5 Haudenosaunee nations, connected by the Great Law of Peace. Each white square and the tree in the center represents one of the original 5 nations. The white lines extending from one end to the belt to the other represents the path of peace, welcoming other nations to take shelter under the Great Law of Peace and join the Confederacy. The Tuscarora Nation, the 6th nation in the Confederacy, joined after the belt was created. So I love how some of you were already thinking about the shapes and its relationship in the belt. So thank you for that. All right, so let's move to our last question. So what are you wondering about this wampum belt? So if there's something you haven't shared yet about what you're wondering, please go ahead and add it in the chat. Yeah, the colors are so rich and everything's so symmetrical. What I can say, Shelby, is that, yes, they are meticulously made. So I think while I cannot speak to any mathematical equations that help with the final product, it is the grid in which it's woven is very intricate. Yeah. We have sinew and then, of course, the wampum beads. So, okay, I'll go ahead and we'll continue here. So As many of you have already pointed out, these wampum belts are more than just beautiful purple and white shell beads. Wampum belts can be used as an agreement, a record, an invitation, a promise, an ornament, a warning, a diplomatic tool, a reminder, and a way to heal. And it's also important to note that wampum isn't an actual belt to be worn, and it isn't money. Okay, so thank you again for sharing your thoughts in the chat. Now that we've seen an important diplomatic tool, an early example of a treaty, let's shift focus to 3 contemporary Native women leaders from the Shawnee, Mohawk, and Cherokee nations. So we'll go ahead and advance to the next slide. And I think we have a link for you. We want to share the PDF of the teaching poster, which is free on our website, and we encourage you to go to our website to explore as well as to get the teaching poster. Later today, you'll learn more about one of the historical women, Nonhelema, described in the biographies. But I just have to say, you know, Renee, what I really love about this poster is how it captures women's voices, both contemporary and past, and within this theme of leadership.
I do too, Yadira. I agree. It becomes, I think, really relevant for students to start with people today, and then work backwards, because the 1770s might seem long ago for young people, and even for some of us. And it was a while ago. And this approach might really provide some relevance and a connection point for students. So that's kind of why we thought, let's start with today and then move backwards. And just, I want to acknowledge before we go on and read the quotes from the women and introduce you to them, that there's a lot of good questions about the wampum belts. Maybe we'll get to some of those in the Q&A. We might not be able to answer all of your questions, but we think this is just such a nice tool to have these wonderings and then have students go out and do more research on their wonderings. And we have a wonderful guide called the Haudenosaunee Guide that, you know, we'll make sure is part of the learning lab and share it with you. And that gives a lot of kind of just foundational background on the Haudenosaunee, how they came together, and also on wampum belts and so forth. So that's another resource from Native Knowledge 360 for your learning. Okay, but we'll go ahead. I guess we'll move on and introduce you to these contemporary women, women through quotes.
Hey, so pictured here is Dakota Brant, or De'ojastogo Atai. Dakota is a citizen of the Mohawk Nation from the Oswegan Territory Turtle Clan. She is the 4th great niece of Molly Brant, or Konwatsi'tsiaienni. This is her reflection of her ancestors' role in the American Revolution. Oh, and before I read the quote, I also want to point out, do you see the wampum belt that is draped over her arm here? That's good. Okay. I think of Molly as somebody powerful, resilient, political. Somebody who knew her mind and knew what she wanted for herself, her family, and for her people. Oh, so cool. Okay. All righty. Take just another moment to kind of absorb that powerful quote. Okay, and then we'll move on to the next quote. So in this picture, we have Whitney Roach, Waduslisi. She is a citizen of the Cherokee Nation and is the 6th great-granddaughter of Nanye'hi, or Nancy Ward. Nancy Ward makes me feel powerful. She is my great-grandmother, way down the line. But still, knowing that her blood runs through my veins is very important. The resiliency that she had in times of war. But she really advocated for peace, because you're faced with so many things when everything's crumbling around you, and to make decisions for not only yourself and your family, but your community. Yeah.
Thanks, Yadira. And there's some, questions about the clothing. And so I believe that each of the women, had a lot of sovereignty over the clothes that they wanted to wear, and some were made by even national treasures. In this case, the Cherokee Nation national treasure made the clothing. So, that was important to them. To clothing are such important symbols of identity. So we'll go ahead and move on to the third woman featured, and this is Becky Lynette White. We call her Lynette, and she's from the Shawnee tribe. That I think I said there are 3 Shawnee federally recognized tribes today: Eastern Shawnee, Absentee Shawnee, and the Shawnee. She's from the Roundfoot clan, so that means that dog and wolf clan people are related, and in our Shawnee tradition, our names follow our clans, and they also show some of our roles and responsibilities in the community. She is a descendant of 4 of the 5 divisions of Shawnee. So we originally had 5 septs that further gave us roles and responsibilities in our culture and societies. And she comes from the leaders Blackfish, Black Hoof, Black Bob, and Chief Cornstalk. And we'll go in more depth with Chief Cornstalk's sister, Nonhelema. She made the dress and apron as a tribute to her ancestors. And this really reminds me of my grandmother, who had an apron like this. This design is her own innovation of a traditional camp dress, and it's worn while preparing for and during ceremonies. And so these women are very, very important. I mean, women and men have very complementary roles in Shawnee society. It's very, spring and fall are well balanced, with women taking the lead in spring and men taking the lead in fall, and particular roles in our foods. But this is a really, really important role that Lynette serves, and she's very well regarded as a leader in the community for keeping those foods that feed our spirits and our bodies. So she says, "I've always seen my grandparents trying to create a tool or something to improve life. And I think that's where Shawnee people have always been, trying to improve life, to grow things, and to make life better for the next generations. Always do your best, give your best, and be your best." And even that idea, we say, "Nikochaye," I'm doing my best. So that's like part of, some of us will have part of that as our daily prayer. Is like, we're all just doing the best we can. And so that's kind of a Shawnee thought right there. So, this is a nice introduction, I think, to those 3 contemporary women and their communities. And we're wondering, did you notice any words or any kind of ideas that stood out across the 3 quotes? Because we kind of, when Yadira and I were reading these, we found a theme that we, kind of resonated with us. We found the words and ideas around being powerful, being resilient, and this kind of mindset that seems important to protect the communities for future generations really stood out to both of us. So let's turn it back to you on the next slide with a question.
Yeah, as Renee and I were preparing for this presentation, we were reflecting on how we're often surrounded by so many female leaders. And so we thought it'd be great to ask you all, is there a female relative or person in your life who you think of as powerful? And we know that can be personal, so if you feel comfortable to share, please do so in the chat. I know Renee and I were discussing our mothers, our sisters, a lot of them, yes. Aunties, yes.
Teachers.
Oh, I love that. We definitely have to give a shout out to Michelle Smith. If you're out there listening, you are a fierce leader.
Yes, impacted your student. So powerful. All it takes is one person, right? One teacher, one, person that really believes in you, and, it can really change and shape your future. It's great.
Yes, cousins. Oh, Irene, thank you for sharing. Storytelling mentor. Wow, Amazing.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
that was great. Yeah.
We could go on and on, right? This is
Yeah. Yeah, this is really nice. And we I think can all attest to strong, powerful women leaders. And this type of leadership has existed for thousands of years. Women have been the backbone of not only indigenous cultures, but many cultures and histories. During the American Revolution period and beyond. The information about the historical women that are featured in our poster come from historical documents, research by Native scholars, and oral histories kept by communities themselves. Their descendant communities hold different perspectives of these three historical leaders. And you'll find that sometimes the questions that we pose and the answers aren't always crystal clear or black and white. There might be nuance and there might be complexity. But some hold them in positive regard, while others are looked at or viewed a little more critically. But it's important to know that Native people often hold diverse points of view. So there's not sort of one Native perspective on things, or even within tribes or even within families. I can attest to this. We have differences of points of view and opinion and lived experiences. And there's also diverse historical interpretations of the past. As we stand here today, we can look back through different lenses. So let's learn a little bit more about Nonhelema, a Shawnee woman leader from the American Revolution. And the important thing to note before we move on is that all of these women featured in the poster were real people. They were strong, protective, and resilient.
absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Renee. Okay, so what you're looking at is just a few pages of our teaching poster. And this is the layout for all three women who are featured in the teaching poster. So on the left, you're going to see the biography and a map of the native homelands of that particular nation. In the middle, you're going to see a timeline, and we're going to talk a little bit about that towards the end of today's presentation. And then we just finished reading the quote there on the bottom half of that second page. And then on the right, this is the learning that you're going to take into the classrooms for your students. This is our graphic organizer, and it lists a few questions that we're going to work together on. So let's go ahead. We're going to kind of dive into the learning. Let's think about this question. So Renee in a moment is going to read the first paragraph of the biography, but we want you to think about the following question. What was Nonhelema's role in her community? So look for the answer when Renee proceeds with the biography.
Thanks, Yadira. And I've got to say, I was looking over at the chat, and these are very moving tributes to important women in your life. So thank you so much for sharing. Okay, so are we ready for me to read about Nonhelema? Okay. Nonhelema, also known by her English name Catherine, was born into a family of Shawnee chiefs around 1718. Her brother Hokulesqua, or Cornstalk, was chief of Shawnee spiritual leaders and healers. In 1734, she married a chief and maintained her position of influence. Standing over 6 feet tall, she was reported to be a regal woman. She gained a reputation as a powerful and effective warrior in the 1760s, but after the conflicts of the French and Indian War ended, she became one of her people's peace chiefs, as was customary when her people were no longer at war. And so the teaching poster pulls out some key terms. So you might see peace chiefs in orange. And in the Shawnee culture, that means that there are two types of chiefs traditionally. Peace chiefs lead their community during times of peace, and then war chiefs take on decision-making powers and lead during times of war. After those wars conclude, the war chief turns the leadership role back to the peace chiefs to maintain that role and that place in society.
Yeah, thank you, Renee. And Felipa, if I may ask, could we take a look at that paragraph that Renee just read? And I believe it's that next slide, just to give folks some reference to the key terms and the first part of the biography. I think it's, yeah, just that next slide. Yeah, perfect. We'll give you a moment just to kind of peruse that again. And just a reminder, we are looking and we're thinking about what Nonhelema's role in her community was.
And Philip has added that into the chat too. So if you all would like to answer that, that'd be great.
Yeah, we'll give folks a little bit of time to reflect on that and add their answers into the chat before we go into our next paragraph. Okay, and I'm happy to provide some answers, some feedback as well. I will say what stood out to me is this. Yes, thank you, Meg. I was just gonna say 6 feet tall, a regal woman that is 6 feet tall, a warrior. The visual of a woman of that stature is remarkable to me and breathtaking. I can just picture, you know, Nonhelema now on the front lines. Yeah, wonderful. Let me see, is there anyone else? And yes, thank you. Looks like she played many roles, including a warrior. Yep. Co-leader with her husband. Served as the peace chief to sustain stability.
This is an interesting one. In modern terms, it's like she was a military veteran who became a civilian leader or administrative official. So it sounds like she's wearing a lot of hats, actually. Yeah.
Wonderful. Hey, Renee, what do you think? Shall we move on to the next section?
I think we're ready.
Okay, great. And thanks again, everyone, for adding your thoughts into the chat. It really helps provide a rich learning experience. So, all right, so now we're going to go to the next slide. So I'm going to read a paragraph, and I want you to think about the following question. What were her major leadership accomplishments? Yeah, fantastic. Oh, thank you so much. Okay, so let's think about that before I read. All right. So in 1774, a conflict between the Shawnee and Americans erupted that lasted 20 years. Shawnee people went to great lengths to avoid violence, but when attacked by Americans, they fought to protect their homelands. That year, Nonhelema reluctantly fought alongside her brother, Chief Okalesqua, and the Shawnee against American colonists in a war for lands in Ohio, Kentucky, and Virginia. Though she fought in the conflict, she and Chief Okalesqua wanted peace for their people and so negotiated a treaty with the American colonists. The treaty ceded lands to the Americans. So I'll give you a moment to reflect on that. And I also want to point out on the right-hand side is an image of Shawnee homelands. Again, just to provide that visual and that context. While you're thinking and writing into the chat, I just want to take this opportunity to say that in our poster, we do have key terms for your students and teachers. And so, for example, ceded means gave lands, which might be an easier word for your students, but I just wanted to point out there is a section in our poster that goes over these key terms. And I believe Renée pointed it out earlier as well. Okay. Yes, thank you, Meg. She reluctantly fought war for land, ceded land in a treaty. Go back up. So she fought to protect her people and land and wanted peace. Negotiated that. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. This is great. Yeah. Maintain peace. Yep. She did not back down from defending her people's land and sovereignty. Beautiful. Yes. So I'm seeing a lot of the same, defending, protecting, helping negotiate for the peace of her community. Absolutely. This is great. Thank you. So just want to point out, it's important to note that the Shawnee were forcibly removed to Oklahoma in the 1830s and have made their homes there for over 200 years.
I think that goes back a little bit when you point that out, Yadira, that Indian Removal Act doesn't define, all the different tribes that were removed, but it certainly had a big impact, and it kind of shows you the resilience of, the American Revolution being very involved there, and the French and Indian War and Lord Dunmore's War. And they mentioned this, what always gets me on this slide is this 20-year war. It's just so much, survival. And one of the good things to know is that, our communities, really are working to thrive today, whether it's growing, some of our traditional foods back in our homelands, or seeking UNESCO World Heritage sites and protecting some of our sacred lands again. And this is happening across many communities. So those don't define us, but it is important to sort of note that people really worked through all of this despite a lot of adversity.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think what stood out to me is we're understanding how complicated this position was to maintain peace. So I think we can recognize that position that Nonhelema faced was very difficult. While she tried to negotiate a treaty and did save lives in the process, in turn, she gave up homelands. And so as a result, many Shawnee rejected the treaty because they didn't want to cede lands to the Americans. But Nonhelema and Chief Hokulesqua believed it secured friendships and guaranteed peace and safety for the Shawnee people, which was their top priority. So on the other side, you could understand where they were coming from. Nonhelema upheld the treaty by acting as a messenger between the Americans and the Shawnee. She even provided cattle to feed the American troops. I found that to be a very interesting kind of like fun fact too, within all of the hats that she wore. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to you, Renee, and as you guide us through the final question of Nonhelema's biography.
Thank you, Yadira. So we're going to look for this answer. What were her major leadership accomplishments? The answer to this question, and there is some crossover we found a little bit with this, but this is the third question on that graphic organizer that you see. So leadership accomplishments. So we'll go ahead and read the last passage from the poster. This isn't, I think we pulled out one paragraph, but this is most of the information about Nonhelema. So on our next slide, I'll go ahead and read this section out loud. But again, the question is, what we're looking for actions that she took during and after the American Revolution. So attacks continued back and forth between the Americans and the Shawnee through the 1780s. But after the Americans and the British made peace in 1783, thus ending the American Revolution War, Nonhelema returned to her people. She moved to a town led by Mohawk, a relative and a peace chief. Despite signing a treaty, Americans attacked his town. One of the Americans killed him on the spot, and others took women and children as hostages. It is thought that Nonhelema was taken hostage and released to her people several months later. Although no records have been discovered about her later years, oral history tells us that Nonhelema likely lived out her days as a respected leader and advisor among the Shawnee people. So, what are some of the actions that she took before and after the American Revolution. And even during, I guess, too. That's part of the answer. Yeah, and I mean, Curtis is posing a critical question that we often hear in a lot of professional developments, or when we're sharing this information, is sort of, why am I hearing this now? And you know, Curtis goes on to talk about, you know, this conflict, that like some detail that spanned the birth of my country as an independent state. This is a crucial, well-studied time, and you know, pointing out that just now he's learning about that. So I appreciate that, Curtis. And we're really glad that we can all talk about this and bring more accurate content and just provide more perspectives and nuance to our history. So she trusted the treaty would bring peace. It didn't. Yeah, it may have for a little while, but you know, clearly that you know, not all of the results ended how she would have liked. She fought as a warrior to defend her people's land and negotiated a treaty to bring peace, right? So she was a diplomat, she was a warrior. And despite the events she endured, we see Nonhelema continue to go back to her people. It seems that she took on the sacred duty of leading her people during conflict and peace. She could not be intimidated. You know, I really appreciate you mentioning the sacred duty, because I think for people who've served in the military and, you know, they do see it often as a sacred duty, you know, especially historically. And so this is really, you know, an important point. And again, there's so many different perspectives on these things. So yeah, she served in the war. She was a diplomat, a negotiator. She signed treaties. So she served in that leadership role. She probably saved some lives, and she certainly tried to save lands for the people. So I really appreciate you all sharing. And you know, we know that she lived out her days as an advisor and leader among the Shawnee. So you know, it even raises more questions about the historical record and what else we might learn in the future about her life.
Yeah, and again, I so appreciate everyone's thoughtful comments in the chat. Um, so Renee, I think we can probably move to the timeline. Yeah, here we go. It's great. I love this feature of our teaching poster, because it summarizes, if not, it really mirrors a lot of what you're saying in the chat, but in this timeline format. So I just want to point out a couple of things. So we think that students will really respond well to this type of chronological order, and it's very useful. But I want to point out that the bottom bolded sections have to do specifically with Nonhelema's life, whereas on the top, kind of like that gray shaded section, that's kind of just giving you some historical context about what's happening as Nonhelema, you know, takes on these leadership roles throughout time. So, and again, pointing out that this timeline feature is included for each of the 3 women in the poster. Okay. All righty. Woo, that was a lot to cover, and you all did such a great job. So let's go to our next slide.
So I guess we wanted to thank you all and say gracias, Niawe, Wato. Thank you in a few different languages, including Shawnee, Cherokee, Spanish, English. And interestingly, the Mohawk word for thank you is the same as Shawnee, but I wasn't sure how to spell it. There were a few different ones, and I ran out of time to see the spelling, but it is the same word, which is kind of interesting and neat connection. So let's reflect for a minute. I think we have time. What understandings do you have that you did not have before completing the session? If you want to add anything, I know this sort of did come up for some of you, kind of a critical lens on looking at history. But are there other understandings you might want to share that you didn't have before that you feel like you have now? And it might be understandings, it might be we've generated some new questions together um, about the past or about today. So feel free to put those in the chat. And we're going to go ahead and make sure you have the link to our upcoming professional development. We have a lot of offerings for teachers, many free and online, so they're available nationally, and also some things on site in New York and DC. But we will put that in the chat as well. And let's see what if you wanted to share just a little bit more.
I'm gonna have to ask you guys to put that link in the chat because the
Oh,
live link doesn't transfer when I copy paste it.
oh,
I can
sure.
do that. I'll do that real quick.
Okay.
Hopefully this one works. There we go. Oh, I'm not sure if that's a live link either.
Let me try that one.
Third time's the
Oh,
charm.
here, that came through. Yadira, yours came through as a live link.
Okay, let me get one more link in there.
And there's some really nice comments coming in too.
That's great. Yep, I'm seeing I need to read some history books about and written by Native peoples. And Indigenous Peoples History of the United States. I think that's what it's called. Dr. Debbie Reese wrote the young adult version of that. It's an excellent read. And there's many others, but that comes to mind first.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Renee, but I'm seeing so many wonderful questions. I think there was one Q&A, and I'd love to spend more time, but here's what I can say. I think the best starting point is to go to our website, as we've listed in the chat. There's just a robust list of resources. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about women leaders in Native women leaders in the American Revolution, our resources are phenomenal. And we just launched our digital book not too long ago. So it is quite robust, and I think you'll all enjoy that.
Yeah, there's a lot there. And additionally, we have, everything standards aligned. So standards aligned resources on Thanksgiving. And we work, with communities on, in really, I think, significant ways to produce these. And so we just do invite you to explore that website. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us. We'll turn it over to Philippa, I think.
Great. Thank you so much. I think we do have some more questions if you want to try to take some of those. In the meantime, I'll just remind everyone, we do have a Learning Lab collection that has all of the resources that Yadira and Renee showed you today and spoke about, as well as some extension content. So you can find all of that in the link I just put in there. Also, we would love it if you would help us improve our programming. So I'm putting another link in the chat right now to our survey for today's session, and we really value and appreciate your feedback. And do you want to take some of the questions from Q&A? Should I read those out to you, or there? I'll read one and see if you want to take it. It says,
Or if
"Our
we can.
piece." What? I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. I was just going to say, yes, we'd be happy to answer if we can.
Okay, yeah, if you can, of course. Are peace chiefs or war chiefs normally a specific gender? How unusual is it for a woman to be a war chief, for example?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know if I can speak with full confidence, but I can say with some confidence that I think typically these are male roles more often, much more often. So I think it's a little bit unusual. But it's not this has happened before, so I don't think Nonhelema was the only war chief or peace chief in our history. Mhm.
Yeah, and I'm happy to add a little bit more. So again, I think we both mentioned this, a wonderful page in the teaching resource that lists the key terms for your students. And I'll just go ahead and read aloud what we have listed for peace chief. So peace chief in Shawnee culture, excuse me, in the Shawnee tradition, there are two types of chiefs. Peace chiefs lead their community during times of peace. War chiefs take on decision-making powers and lead during times of war. After wars are completed, war chiefs turn the leadership role back to the peace chiefs. So it's a very interesting relationship there, but it is not gender specific, as Renee has just mentioned, and as it's indicated in our own key terms section. So thank you for that really great question.
Does anyone else have any questions? I noticed back when we were looking at the wampum belt, there were also some questions about how they're used. Do you want to, if you could provide a little more information about those too?
Sure, yeah. There are multiple uses for a wampum belt, but I guess let me first start off by saying it seems maybe a little confusing because we say belt, and in our minds, we might think a belt that you put around your waist, right? So no, they're not worn. um, they are not, I know that one of the misconceptions is that they were considered forms of money. That was also not the case, but yeah, let me just list off some of the different uses of wampum belts. So we know that they could be used as an invitation, a diplomatic tool, an agreement. Let me see here. What else did we say? So sorry. Back to my notes. Okay, an agreement, a record, a promise, an ornament, and a warning. And I will say, I think one of the uses that stood out to me is a way to heal a community. I thought that was really powerful. So I hope that answers the question.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. So really, I'd like to thank both of you so much for presenting today. Some of the comments in the chat are, I would love for this to be a recurring series. Agreed. So I know you guys do a lot of professional development, so people can find more content from you there. Also, this is our Cultivating Learning series is a once monthly offering that we have. So I just put the link in the chat. We hope you can join us next month. We'll be joined with educators from the National Postal Museum talking about civic education. And just thank you so much to our presenters, Renee and Yadira, and to our participants today. Appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.